Every day people stop me on the street and say, Matt, my life is a miserable spiraling black hole of depression and self-loathing because I'm overwhelmed by trying to sort through the Greek manuscript evidence supporting the New Testament. What can you do for me? Well, let me make this clear. I've heard your concerns, and today you're in luck because this video is going to teach you the basics of text criticism. Come on, let's go! First, here's what you'll need to get started. All right, obviously I can't keep that up for an entire episode because in just a minute my ignorance is going to be exposed. Text criticism is a brutally hard field. And by now, if you've been watching my videos, I think you know what I'm talking about. But text criticism is that process by which we go back through all of the thousands on thousands of manuscripts supporting the New Testament and sift through them to try to distill them down to an accurate representation of what the original Greek Bible must have looked like. And when you consider the money, the fame, the women involved, if text criticism were easy, everybody would be doing it. But the people who can do it and do it well are rock stars, and I'm not one of them. I'm not even close. I'm not even in the zip code. But what I think I can do is explain to you what resources are needed to go and sift through this stuff for yourself, and also give you a few steps for how to get going on it if you'd like to. The first step on our little journey toward being able to do text criticism on our own is to familiarize ourselves with New Testament Greek. And I'm wincing because I know that's overwhelming. That's overwhelming to me too. It is a hard language. But it kind of has to be a hard language. It has to be a language with a ton of complexity and flexibility in order to convey ideas as deep and broad as what comes up in the New Testament. We're talking about philosophy, psychology, theology, the big picture stuff about God and human behavior. You need a complex language to be able to say that stuff, and you need to be conversant in that complex language in order to do text criticism on your own. Here's the thing. We don't have to be there right now, and I'm thankful for that because I'm not there right now. But a good place to start is this book right here, Learn to Read New Testament Greek. It's exactly what the title says it is. It's only that thick. It starts on the assumption that we know nothing about this language, and it gives us a basic nuts and bolts introduction in a way that you can get quickly. Now, this is not going to make you fluent in first century Greek the way you might strive to be fluent in Spanish after 8 semesters in high school and 2 more in college, but we don't need to speak Greek. What we're working on here is a study language. We need to get to a place where, for starters, we can just basically decode simple Greek and understand a few grammatical principles so that we can start to get into the world of some of the resources I'm going to show you in a minute. The second step, which also requires a bit of work, is to become incredibly familiar with the English New Testament or New Testament in whatever language you speak. It's a big chunk, and in my Bible, it's artificially large because we got the sprinkler turned on it and it all swelled up. But you can see that's a lot of stuff to sort through. And it's really easy to imagine like, oh yeah, I've been around church and I think I basically get the gist. When I went to seminary, they made me take a New Testament survey course first semester. And in my heart and also out loud, I was like, yeah, I think I know this content pretty well. I am qualified to be a seminary student, and I've read this several times. And so my prof gave us all a pre-test to demonstrate our knowledge, or rather our ignorance, on day 1. And I scored a D+, which was humbling and demonstrated that I did indeed need his class and could probably use to take it about 70 more times. The point is, it's hard to do a good job of sorting through the source material when we're not even really that familiar with it in our own language. So this is just something that we just have to throw time at. Again, believe it, don't believe it, whatever. If we want to do this process, you have to invest in reading this stuff. A third step is just to sit down and go through a good reading list on text criticism. I think this will really help us to hear from the rock stars in the field, but it will also help us to just come to understand the scope of the discussion. You know what it's like when You go to a party and you jump in, and at first you don't really know what everybody's talking about, but if you sit there and you're quiet and you listen long enough, you get, oh, that lady's kind of this lady, that dude's kind of this dude, this guy's the funny guy, this is what they're talking about, and here is where I could fit into the conversation. Reading books that span the spectrum of a field help you to understand the discussion, and then when we're done listening to that conversation for a while, we figure out where we might be able to fit into it. So we're going to start easy. This book, the New Testament manuscripts, or documents rather, Are They Reliable by F.F. Bruce. This dude, full disclosure, is a committed Christian. He's enthusiastic about the Bible, and he's going to give you a nice argument for why it checks out and it's reliable, and it's tiny and short. So if you just want to get the super basic intro and gist, that's a great place to start. Take his presuppositions into account as you do. This book by Ewart, From Ancient Tablets to Modern Translations, is one that I've been working through. I could only find a used copy, but I really like this book. It assumes that the reader is competent, but doesn't assume that the reader is great at Greek. But this thing gives you all kinds of examples from specific manuscripts of particular issues and questions here and there without overwhelming you. So it's a really nice next layer deep after you get done with Bruce. The next layer deep after that is this book that I have gone all the way through. This is Paul Wagner's A Journey from Text to Translations. And I've beat the snot out of this thing. I've taken it fishing with me and all over the place. This really takes you through the whole story of what Christians have done. A lot of the same subject matter that I've talked about in the last couple of videos. Again, tons of great examples, very understandable. Doesn't assume that you know too much Greek, but takes a little deeper dive than Ewart. Then we get into something tricky, and some of you are going to recognize a name on this book and wonder what I'm doing. The Text of the New Testament, Its Transmission, Corruption, and Restoration by Bruce Metzger, and this fourth edition is also by Bart Ehrman. Now, the reason this book is important and I want to recommend it to you is because Metzger is the godfather of text criticism right now. He's a Princeton guy, he's excellent at what he does, and he's written 3 editions of this thing. But in the fourth, he brought on Bart Ehrman. Now, Bart Ehrman was a Christian, but now he would say, well, for a while he said he was an agnostic. Now I think he would just say he's an atheist. He's looked at the same data that these other guys have, and he's arrived at a different conclusion, one of rejection. But he hasn't done it dishonestly. And so it's tempting to just be like, oh, that guy, he has conclusions I don't like, so he's a dirty liar. I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be prepared to call him that. He's a very reputable text scholar. And as I go through his content, they're being fair to the manuscript evidence. It's just that he's adding up the data, the same data that we can look up ourselves, and coming to a different conclusion than those of us who would identify as a Christian. And that's okay. This book will push you. It's the hardest of everything I've put in front of you so far. But I want to wrap up with something that is something of a response to that book. Daniel Wallace is another rock star of text criticism. I'm going to talk more about some online resources he has in a minute. This guy is a part of Bible.org. I think he works out of Dallas, and he is stunningly brilliant. Wallace responds to some of Ehrman's gripes or critiques or questions about the manuscript in this book, and so I think it's a great way to wrap all of that up. I know that we're already to the point of maybe feeling overwhelmed with how much content this is, but hey, we're halfway home, and again, this is all stuff we can do. This is where it starts to get really fun. The fourth step is actually looking at the manuscripts for ourselves. It might seem impossible, and until very recently, it was mostly impossible because all of these were tucked away in some museum somewhere in a collection that you can't access. And if you do, it takes years of cutting through red tape, and then you have to wear like a special suit like you're going to deal with diseases or something, but it's not like that anymore. This guy right here, Daniel Wallace, is the head of an organization called the Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts. That's right. So CSNTM.org. And what they're doing is gradually cataloging the entire manuscript record supporting the New Testament, which means you can just go and look it up for yourself for free on whatever device you're watching this video on right now. Just compare that to where Erasmus was in the late 15th century, trying to make a Greek New Testament so people could translate it into English and German, and he's got nothing. maybe 5, maybe 6 manuscripts, and none of them are even fully complete. And he was one of the rock star scholars of the day, and now schlub me is miles ahead of him in terms of resources to be able to get after this on my own. It's an amazing time to live in, and we can just have fun and take advantage of it. Well, here's what you're going to find. When you pop into this and you start looking, you have the Greek book in hand, and you're like, I'm ready to go. And you'll quickly realize, I am not ready to go. I don't know what any of that means. It's all squished together. I don't even know how to read it. It's overwhelming. I get it. You just pump the brakes. What I would encourage you to do is just find one modest verse, a verse that you feel like you understand really well in English or your native language, and go and look at the text support for that verse. Try to understand if there are any manuscript conflicts on that verse. Try to understand what different people have done with it, how to reconcile it, and just work on that phrase for yourself. It's going to take some time, but I think you can do it. I think I can do it. And hopefully, that'll be a nice point of entry that will cause you to ask the next question and the next question and the next question, and to begin to get a sense of what kind of work would have to go into doing the entire document at that pace. Finally, step 5 is trying to connect the dots between what we're doing with the Greek text and modern translation work. And I have got this stuff that has to do with that. This is this is a Hebrew English lexicon, so that's useful if you're in the Old Testament. We can set that aside for now. This comes in really handy. I've showed you this a couple times. This is the Reader's Greek New Testament. This is the sum of all of this work by all of the best people. So this is the eclectic manuscript that takes into account all kinds of different factors and questions that people wrestle with to say this is our best shot at distilling what the original is right now. You want this in front of you because this is what the experts have it being based on a full and complete look at the evidence. So it serves as a really nice check. Then additionally, you are going to want a newer version of one of these. This is a Greek lexicon, not a Greek dictionary. A Greek lexicon covers the words that appear in the New Testament, and it orders them out. So again, you got to have a little bit of Greek because it's mostly in Greek, but it tells you everywhere that this particular word appears in the New Testament. You might be like, well, why don't I just get a regular good old concordance or commentary? Oh, it's way up there and I'm short. Why don't I just go get my commentary and flip through that, and I'll be like, oh, well, here's everywhere the word love appears. Well, because, and this is a classic example, in English, the word love is just love. I love pizza. I love my wife. Make love. I love it when you sing songs. Like, whoa, what are we talking about here? Those things mean very, very different things. Whereas in Greek, those all have different words. And so the reason you want to use a lexicon is to help you sort out which Greek word is appearing in which place so that you can compare manuscripts to be comparing like to like and not screwing it up because you're retrofitting it from English. It's important when you're doing this too to have a bunch of different translations of the New Testament sitting around that you can compare notes with. This one, my Garnormus Bible, is an ESV, English Standard Version. I'm going to do another video where I talk about where these fit in the family tree of translation and translation philosophy. But this is going to read somewhere between the King James Version. All I have is this kind of cruddy old rickety version, but it gets the point across. And a more modern translation like the NIV, or a very literal translation like the New American Standard, which is almost like just Greek to English, which makes it a little bit clumsy. If you have all of these to compare and you're familiar with the translation philosophy behind them, then you become able to piggyback off of the work of the geniuses who put their brains behind all of these documents. Further, if you want to get into it on your own, without a ton of Greek knowledge, this little series is excellent. Word Studies in the Greek New Testament by I never know how to say it. Now I'm on camera. West. I'm embarrassed. Whatever that looks like to you, that's his name. This is a really cool thing. This book takes you through the book of Mark, and it breaks down the Greek as though you spoke Greek, but it does it in English. So it's kind of a cheat to get you into this world in a way that helps you understand translation principles and even some text criticism principles to have a sense of how we arrive at what we arrive at with all of these documents. Truth to be told, I'm trying to illustrate two things here. One, text criticism is hard, it's complex, it should be hard, it should be complex, and there is a tremendous amount of work behind the Bibles that we have sitting in front of us. I think it's very easy to take that for granted. It's very easy to just casually gripe about, like, well, the Bible, there's corruption, the Roman Catholic, Constantine, the church burned, there's burning. Like, come on. You hear all of these conspiracy theories and weird things floating around, but that's coming from people who haven't done any of this work. And I can't claim to be Mr. Expert Guy, but what I can point you to is there's a tremendous amount of effort, energy, and thought and research and very difficult scholarship that goes into figuring this out, and it is nowhere near as simple as some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory about some dude burning a manuscript in the 4th century, and that's how we got a corrupt Bible. We got 27,000 manuscripts that we can work on if we can just figure out how to do it and put in the time on it. So step one is to overwhelm you a little bit and say, this is big and difficult and hard, and it should be, and that's okay. Step two is to say, but it's not so big and difficult and hard that we can't verify it for ourselves if we really care. Some of you watching this have a gift that I don't understand and I do not share, which is faith. You just came to believe in God one day and it all made sense. I'm not making fun of you. You are awesome. That is special. I don't have that. I have to do the grind through it and think about it and have all the ups and downs, the eyes wide open thing. And I'm not saying your eyes aren't wide open if you have the gift of faith. I'm just saying I think more of us are wired like me. And understanding how the work happens is really important to me. And even being able to flirt with doing it a little bit on my own is really important to me. If you're wired the same way, hopefully this video will help you out in the same way that it helps me to know this stuff. I think that's plenty for now. We need to talk about translations next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and we'll see you soon.